Hey folks, MandicReally here, and we're about to take a tour of my studio. Something I've not really shown before because, well, I didn't want to show everybody where I lived and where all of my stuff was located. But we're actually leaving Philadelphia. By the time you're seeing this video, we're no longer in Philly. We're heading to Portland, Oregon. So we're going to be starting over with a whole new studio. We might as well show you what we've got in my existing space. Behind me over here is a 600 square foot, 3-car garage that I've been using for my YouTube studio for the last 3 to 4 years now. And in a tight little alley back here in Philadelphia, there's the L train only about 100 feet away from us, so we constantly have to deal with the sound of that in the background of my videos. You've probably never even noticed it though. So we're gonna take a look at the studio space and the equipment that I use to film these videos. Let's head on in. Before we have a look around my chaos that is my studio, it's my pleasure to stop and tell you folks about this video's sponsor, Brilliant.org. Solving problems in 3D printing and making reminds me of complex math problems sometimes. That's where Brilliant.org comes in. Brilliant is an interactive online learning platform with thousands of lessons in math, data analysis, programming, and AI. Brilliant helps build problem-solving skills you can really use through active engagement, making learning not just effective, but more enjoyable. Brilliant helps you build critical thinking skills through problem-solving, not memorizing. And it is perfect for building a daily learning habit with quick, engaging lessons. I've personally been diving into some of the programming and Python courses, which as a noob to the whole thing, their courses start at the low level and really build my way up. If you want to improve your knowledge base, your problem-solving skills, I'd recommend checking out Brilliant.org. It really helps me stay sharp day to day while I'm doing my tasks. I can do a quick lesson and feel like I'm still keeping my brain more active than just the routine that I fall into. If you want to check it out, please consider following the link in the description, brilliant.org/MandicReally. You'll get 30 days premium access for free if you follow that link, and if you decide to stick with it, you'll get a full year premium subscription for 20% off. If, once again, you follow that link, brilliant.org/MandicReally. Thank you again to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Now, I do want to make a quick note. I had a friend of mine help me film this video who is not a videographer. It was his very first time ever using a gimbal, so some of the shots won't be as smooth as my typical content would be. It's a behind the scenes look, so I hope you understand that. Let's get into this. This is what I call the workshop side of the studio. It's meant to be the dirty area. I just closed the garage door so we don't have any of the noise and the light from outside that we can't really control. So let's turn on the air conditioning. There is a 12,000 BTU mini split AC system in here that does a great job of cooling the space, but doesn't do much for heating the space. So I actually have an additional heater up here on the ceiling that's just running electric. Not efficient, but at least I get heat because this is just a concrete box that I work in every day. The only insulation in this space is the insulation that I put in the ceiling and the garage doors themselves. Other than that, this space is just untreated concrete cinder blocks, and it reflects that when it comes to the heat in the summer and the cold in the winter. I do have carpet down all over the studio, even on the dirty work side of the space, because it helps with noise. So when I'm speaking to you right now, it's not reverberating off a concrete floor. And it also helps to insulate just a little bit and not standing on cold concrete, getting that coming up through my feet, because I usually don't wear boots when I'm in the shop, even when I'm working on this side. Let's start from the garage door and work our way around here a little bit. Welding bench is over here underneath of this shelving system, and there's also the air compressor with a reel here. In a smaller space like this, yes, 600 square feet is big for a home shop, but it's not big for a studio/workshop where I need to make my living. So things like reels make up a excellent use of space. I don't have a hose I have to curl up every time. I can just pull this out and then reel it back in when I'm done. These racks are, storage is key in this situation. So I keep like my power tools on here for home improvement, DIY type stuff, some of the blow molded cases from nail guns and automotive tools that I still use regularly. And then on top of this rack, it's not a great position, but it's where I keep all of my aluminum extrusions and acrylic pieces for the laser cutter and for building 3D printers and projects where I use extrusions. Moving on, this rack is much more about storage space. So extra filament, upcoming projects, 3D printers I haven't gotten to yet, or builds that I haven't begun, all live in that space. There's also a Elgato green screen hanging from the ceiling here that I rarely use, but I do use from time to time, mostly for thumbnails. It makes it easier for me to mask myself out and make the silly YouTuber faces with that. There's a standing desk here that I use to move around the space, and I'll often use when I'm on this side of the studio doing B-roll shots for a video or setting up for a live stream that I might do on this side, though I haven't really moved away from that at this point. Realistically, the whole workshop side of the studio was meant to be a secondary filming space where I could bounce back and forth, and always, if I had a project busy on the workbench on the other side, I could come over here and do a project here and not limit myself by only being able to do one project at a time. And this just ends up where everything collects and junk collects. The next studio, organization will be key, and I'm thinking one big space that's going to be a little easier for me to keep on top of. Over in this corner is a pile of extra stuff, metal, wood, PVC tubing. It's kind of where the junk extra stuff that I need for projects has landed, as well as buried in there is a TIG welder that I really don't use, along with the welding bench that I haven't broken out in forever. If you're not familiar, I used to be a custom car builder. I used to weld every single day. Now I haven't done it in probably 2 years at this point. This is a super heavy glass fronted metal box storage cabinet that I use for chemical cabinet. Buying a yellow chemical cabinet like you should have for them, it was just prohibitively expensive. So this thing has been excellent. It's metal, so it shouldn't burn if something was to combust in there, and it makes it easy for me to see everything. I really like the way it looks. Unfortunately, it is like 150 pounds, so I don't think it's going to be making the trip to Portland with us, so somebody's going to end up with that in the near future. Sub panel off of the main panel in the house, because this space is a lot of electrical stuff going on in here, so there's a 100 amp sub panel just for this space in the house. That door heads to the house, and that door back in the corner heads to the alley where I filmed my Christmas lights video not that long ago at the beginning of the year, and where we let the animals roam and hang out, or I open it for fresh air, because it's literally the only tiny window that I have in this space. Over here is one of my tool carts from when I used to be an auto mechanic and a custom car builder. It has not moved since I parked it here, so I don't think that's making the trip to Portland either. Has sentimental value because I bought that at the very first dealership I worked at, but I can't hold on to everything, unfortunately. Now, what isn't going anywhere is my Matco toolbox. This is my Matco 6228R, RX maybe, I forget. I used to be a Matco guy. I used to sell tools for a living, and this was actually inventory on my truck when I sold tools, and then I stopped selling tools and I kept this one for myself afterward when I went back to working on cars. This has mostly my automotive hand tools in it right now. Some specialty automotive stuff, though I've kind of segregated that out of here a little bit, as I don't do that stuff on a daily basis and it was taking up too much space. I also have a TV that's just for while I'm working. I have some entertainment, and during live streams I'll pull up chat on here so I can keep track of that a little bit better, have a secondary source for monitoring things while I'm going. Moving on, this dividing wall down the middle of the space. At the end of it over here, I've got this vintage Craftsman bandsaw that I adore, but also isn't going to be making the trip because it's just too big and heavy. It needs a full rebuild. I love this thing, the Art Deco style of it, but I'm just gonna have to find another one. They weren't that uncommon back when they came out, so I should be able to find another one and rebuild it properly, or maybe get a better one this time. The dividing wall has 2 toolboxes in front of it because, as I said, I was a custom car builder. I had a lot of tools, still do, and I don't plan to part with most of those. So this one's more of the specialty toolbox where I keep like my hand tools that are a little more specialized, like working on bending tubing for the custom cars that I was building, or I don't even know what all's in here at this point. I've been reorganizing it. Custom buck tools for doing riveting, like building airplanes. Because I built custom cars, we did a lot of weird stuff. And I keep that somewhat more weird things in this box. The smaller one at the end over here, the Snap-on box, was like my day-to-day fabrication toolbox. So I keep like some of my bigger, more specialized metal shaping slapper and, you know, weird tools that people look at you funny when you pull out in this box. That when I did metal shaping on a daily basis, this was a box I worked out of a lot. I also had this rack up here for all of my vice grips. For when I was welding and I was doing panel work on cars, I needed more vice grips than this realistically, but it's handy to have all that stuff visible and accessible. When clamps like this live in the toolbox, they sit on top of each other or they take up too much space if you lay them out flat. This is so much easier. I can grab exactly the size that I want when I want it, and it's at hand. And I can also visibly see if I look over here and one of these spaces is empty, I know I need to look for what's missing there. Anybody who's watched my channels for a long time might recognize this background on the wall here. This is just some metal roofing that I put up on a bedroom wall for my first YouTube channel, Hot Rod Hippie, where I filmed car videos. Channel still exists. I don't really make content for it anymore, but I'm keeping this as long as I can because it's just sentimental at this point, and I know people spot it in the background of some videos, folks who were familiar with the Hot Rod Hippie, and they enjoy seeing it as an Easter egg. Moving around the corner here, I got my drill press, which is currently inaccessible back here behind this workbench. Standard, simple, pedestal style drill press. You cannot overestimate the handiness of a drill press versus hand drilling everything. It is easier. It is easier to apply more torque when you're pushing into things. It's just superior in every single way, and I prefer to use a drill press whenever I can. I'm going to be selling that because it's too heavy to be moving cross country with us, but I will get another one once we get to the new studio. This workbench used to be a centerpiece of my backdrop in the studio on the other side of the space, but it was not serving me the way I wanted, so this I need to put on, you know, Marketplace, Craigslist, and get it gone. Just have somebody come get it out of my space. They can have a nice workbench for themselves. I'm not going to have any use for it anymore. I wish I would have done that already. And that pretty much covers this space except for the lighting. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen it in the corners of the shots as I've been going around here. I've got a handful of lights in this studio space on this side. I've got 2 lights up in the corners above the garage door. I've got this one big lantern in the middle, which just provides a bunch of spill light throughout this space. And then there's a larger 150 watt light in the corner next to the AC unit, which is somewhat more the key light, the brighter light in this space for the main filming. I've always lacked a light over on this side of the studio, and I wanted to add that, but no point to it at this point now. So if I was to stay here, I'd probably put up one more light so I could really light this space. I wanted this space to be more, while I'm working on things, you can see what I'm doing with my hands, and you need a lot of light for that. And I've never quite had enough of it on this side of the studio. Now let's head into the other space. This is the other half of the studio. This is a space I'm certain most of you are familiar with seeing on a regular basis, because this looking toward me here would be my typical shot for my videos, at least for introing them or outros and such. I built this new entire wall. This is actually a 2x4 wall that goes from end to end of this space. I think it's like 16, 17 feet long. The space is 30 feet by like 18 feet or 19 feet deep, somewhere around there. It's like 580 square feet, not quite 600. And I wanted just one big workbench that I could work with and have the printers and make things feel a lot more open and free and not claustrophobic. That's definitely something I want to focus on in the next studio, is more open space. So I can set the camera back further. I can step away from things. Like right now, I step forward and I bump into a workbench. Evan behind the camera right now has to kind of maneuver around, because if he stepped back, he'd step into another workbench. So we're kind of just working with the space that I've got. I've limited myself a little bit by trying to create those 2 different spaces, and I think it wasn't necessarily the right decision. Obviously, I've got printers lined up on this workbench here. I'm planning to have 4, 6 in the background all the time. I made a conscious decision this year to try and move toward only having open source 3D printers in the backdrop of my shot, my primary shot. Not for any particular like, oh, screw that brand reason or anything like that, but just because I don't want to be promoting brands in every single video that I do. I would rather promote open source projects where you could make these things for yourself versus having to buy them. I do have the Prusa Mark IV down there at the end in the enclosure, which is a for sale product, but it's also an open source product, so there's potential you can make it yourself, though not everything is open source about that machine yet. Doesn't really matter. The rep racks up along the top here, I constantly get people asking me about these because they look stunning and I love the way they look, but everybody says, oh, the humidity or the dust, that's gotta be terrible on your filament. It has to be terrible for your prints. And it really just isn't for me. Now, this studio, as I showed, is air conditioned, so that's helping. It's taking humidity out of the air. And I also roll through filament pretty quickly. A lot of these spools will get changed out on a regular basis, so they don't stay up there for too many months at a time. Overall, I just love having access to them, being able to see what I have at a glance, and then I just love the way it looks for this shot when I'm filming videos. And at the end of the day, my job is filming videos. While I use my 3D printers on a regular basis and I truly use them to their limits, I need to have things look good. And that's something that some people don't notice or don't understand about what I do. They'll, oh, why are you using a stealth burner tool head on your 3D printer? Or why are you using XYZ thing? Or why did you build an entirely pink machine? Because I'm a content creator, and at the end of the day, my things have to stand out when you're scrolling through your Instagram or whatever and catch your attention, and that's my job, so catching your attention really matters. I also recently added these two toolboxes underneath of the workbench in an effort to organize a little bit better because I was having piles of stuff. If you think the piles of stuff I have here right now is bad, this was so much worse before. Like this drawer is just extra 3D printer main boards and hot ends and some extruders for projects, just spare parts that I could use to build a machine for upcoming builds. Usually upcoming builds have their own bins somewhere else in the space, so not so much that, but I might pull from here depending on what project it is. And then I keep just all kinds of spare parts, heater cartridges, thermistors. I've been trying to organize things so I know exactly where 3D printer motors are so I can get to them. And any time where I need to dig for something, I at least know I'm only going to be digging in this drawer, not digging on an entire shelf in a shelving unit like I used to have here. I would often end up ordering double or triple of things because I would not be able to find what I know I had on the shelf, and that's why I have so much stuff, is because I couldn't find stuff at one point and ordered another one. It's probably why half of that stuff exists in there. Rolling on along that wall, we have another wall. Actually behind here, you saw it from the outside, is the single car garage door that exists on the outside of the space. I built this wall in front of it because I needed a desk space and I never used that door. I only ever used the bigger one, so it didn't serve me any purpose. It also allowed me to insulate a little bit. I didn't mention that with the other wall. This wall and the other wall that I showed are both covered in painter's drop cloth. So this is a fabric wall covering, and behind it is Rockwool Safe and Sound, which is an insulation made from like lava rocks. So it's flame retardant for one, but it also absorbs sound really well. And in a studio environment where I'm filming, like I said, there's a train on the other side of this wall 100 feet away that goes by hundreds of times a day. And this really helps cut down on noise. Also behind me, I didn't make a point of it, but there's a daycare right behind me. So I have little kids playing in this alley almost every day, or their parents dropping them off, and I have to deal with that on a regular basis, which, good for them, but not so great for my audio when I got laughing little kids in the background. That's kind of creepy. The computer setup that I have here, I've done an entire dedicated video about this desk that I built here. But it's an electric standing desk from the folks at FlexiSpot. I adore it because I spend way too much time sitting in this FlexiSpot chair, which is also quite comfortable. But the whole desk setup is just centered around my video editing. I run a triple monitor setup here, a primary 1440p monitor for my main editing timeline while I'm editing a video, and then the top section is where I'll actually display the 4K video clips that I'm working on. On the left-hand side here, I will have Discord on this monitor, of course. Everybody uses their portrait monitor for Discord, I think, but also I will put my project files so I can see every single video clip that I'm going to be editing in a video on here at a glance, and I can easily work with it. This is just a workflow that I've really fell into, and I adore it. I also have my little Voron Zero there on the end of the bench, which I use for prototyping parts. It needs a rebuild right now, but it is a machine that I used to use on a really regular basis. I've got one of these tiny little Zhiyun lights in the corner for my live streaming setup when I'm at the bench, and a tripod head mounted to a camera arm, which I did an entire video about that before, where I can mount my camera for live streams. HDMI cable managed in there, I can plug it in, capture card in the computer, and I'm ready to roll if I want to stream on Twitch or use that in a video or a stream on YouTube as well. For voiceover, I use this microphone. This is the Beacon mic, USB microphone that I think matches with my other audio equipment really well. It's not perfect, but for the price of this microphone compared to other solutions, it works beautifully, especially for being a USB microphone. I really like that. Beacon sent that to me a while ago, not sponsored, but they did send me that. I appreciate them for that. This is probably a ridiculously bright setup at the moment, but this corner of the studio is where I keep camera gear. So that IKEA cabinet is where my spare cameras, my second camera, and my lenses and tripods and stuff all get stored into, so they have a home. A lot of the time they don't end up in it, but that's the intention for that space. It's a little hard to access. I need a freer, more open setup for the future. Next to the IKEA cabinet and working our way down is the back side of that workbench where the toolboxes, the Ratfink yellow one and the black Snap-on box existed where you saw before. I am always looking for more space to put 3D printers. This is currently where the Bamboo A1 and X1 live. Again, I wanted to move branded stuff out of the main shot, so these moved over here just so they had a home. They still get used on a regular basis. Well, the X1, not so much the A1, that still needs repair from the recall. But the backside of this also has some moving blankets on it. That's a sound technique. So when I'm speaking at the bench, sound waves are coming this way, and this is, again, metal on the other side of this wall. So if I just had that metal, the sound waves would reflect right back at me and cause a reverb, echo. So these super cheap, like $5, $8 at Harbor Freight, simple black, so they're not a weird color, casting color throughout the studio, and they make a big difference when cutting down on the reflective sound waves. This workbench is always a disaster. It's kind of where camera gear lands before it ends up back in the cabinet over there when I'm breaking down cameras from a shoot or whatever, or traveling. And there's my camera bag. It lives underneath of there most of the time. And underneath of this bench is also just where bins for projects usually end up. Spare parts, extra parts that haven't been sorted yet, tools and such, kind of live under there. There's another TV here. This is also the one that I use when I'm working on this side of the studio to catch up on shows, watch YouTube videos, or again, pull up chat when I'm streaming from the workbench, the main bench in this space. And of course, another rep rack because I've got so much filament and there's never enough. I do use something that I've shown a few other creators that they adore, and it's these arms that I have these lights mounted on. These things are the freaking best. They mount up on the wall. They could also be mounted on the ceiling. You could do a lot of things with these, and they just free up the ground. I don't have any light stands floating around actually holding lights at the moment, and it's rare that I need to use them because these things just fold out of the way. I can rotate, move them. I've been doing it throughout the shoot to get light where I want it, and that's exactly why they're here. This wall over here, let's start in the corner at the end of that first wall that I showed you I built in here. This is my full-on Dell server rack that I have in here. People often notice this in the background of videos and just ask me about how long has that been there? Has that always been there? And yes, as long as I've been working in this space. I used to have an office in the house, but I moved everything, my office, everything into this space. As long as I've been doing that, that rack has been here. And that houses my NAS, network attached storage devices. I got 2 of them in there for my video backup work, and then one for my partner Ruby to have her own storage space locally as well. And we run our Plex server off of hers too. This wall obviously just turned into a wrap rack wall. So I've got this nice comfortable couch here that I keep thinking I would use in videos where I'd sit down and just have a chat with you folks, and it's really not worked out that way. Really what it's been is just a catch-all for, you know, clothes while I'm out here and I want to change my shirt for a shot in the video. Jean, my cat, ends up sleeping on here most days, and Ruby, when she comes out here and works with me, just to have some co-working time hanging out together, she ends up sitting here. Above it here, I do have to be careful because I will hit my head on these racks above me, but we've got this wall of filament with a light lighting it up. There is, yes, a dedicated light in the studio just for this wall. Again, this is my job. It's got to look good. This is where the filament I used to use on a regular basis, all the PLAs and PETGs live. I don't think I've touched much up here lately, so there'll probably be less storage space for filament in the next studio space. And then in this kind of in-between space, I didn't get around to mentioning as we walked by, is this pile of no man's land garbage. It's not garbage, it's leftover prints from, live streams on TikTok when I used to do a lot of that. Bins from projects, spare parts, some tripods. This is kind of where things land when they need to be sorted and then forgotten about for months at a time. My intention for this space was always to build a big cabinet here to house resin 3D printers, which you see a stack of here. Got Mono M5S and the M3 Max from Anycubic there. I don't resin print much, you don't see me do it on my channel much, and a large part of why is I hate the smell of it. I work in this space 10, 12 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week. So there's no real time for me to run resin printers when I'm not in here, and it's not gonna bother me. So I wanted to build a whole cabinet that they live inside of and had like its own filtration to keep the smell inside of there. And this tower of printers set up here is where we've landed on that, unfortunately. Maybe in the next studio space, only the M3 Max is actually making the trip with me. Side note, I walked around the studio with Ruby last week and we put tags on things as to what's leaving and what's going with us to Portland. And I put a tag on the M3 Max to get rid of it, and she took it off. I want it to be known that she wanted to keep this because she wants to paint bigger 3D prints and such. So she wanted that machine, not me. It's a good machine. I like it just fine, but I just wanted to note that the wife was the one who said to keep that one. Camera gear. Haven't really talked about that much right now. Evan's currently filming on my Panasonic Lumix GH6, my A camera, the camera I use the most in videos. It films in 5.7K as we are right now, which means I can zoom in and out in a 4K video and not lose any resolution at all. I can do that like 23%, I think. I can zoom in and still looks 100%. I can go beyond that and it still looks really good. I use a slider a lot in my videos. This is the slider that I currently use. This is a Edelkrone Slider Plus on a Benro tripod. It has the head one, I think they are, a pair of them for pan and tilt function. So I can pan and zoom and move around an object while I'm filming it. I do it a lot in my videos, probably too much. I love it. I really like the aesthetic of those shots. I'm not in love with this slider. It's a little jerky. The unedited, unstabilized footage ends up like just a little wiggly in the image, and I hate it, and I have to work with it a little bit, and I have to kind of work around the way this thing functions. Right now I'm speaking to you on a Deity lavalier microphone. I rarely use these. Only reason I would ever use it is something like this, where I'm walking around talking, or if I was doing an interview, because it has 2 transmitters and 1 receiver, I can get 2 people on camera at the same time and not have their audio overlap. This is what I use on a regular basis. This is the microphone setup for this side of the studio, the workshop side. This is a Deity S-Mic 2S. That name tripped me up a little bit, but that is the name, S-Mic 2S. This is a shorter shotgun microphone. So the idea of this is it only picks up audio within a polar pattern, tapering out from the microphone on this. So if I point it at myself, I usually aim for my chest just under my mouth, and it really picks up my voice, but rejects the reverb in the studio or the train sound or the kids going by or whatever, and really picks up my voice. And I love these Deity microphones. I've got 2 of them. This is the shorter one, and the other side of the studio I have a rigid mounted to the desk on a microphone arm that I can reposition throughout my videos or my streams, and that's always living there. That is the Deity S-Mic 2, the bigger sibling to this smaller one. And I think that that largely is the MandicReally Mandic Labs studio. This is a space where I've been producing YouTube videos for you folks to watch, TikToks, TikTok live streams, Instagrams, everything that I do for my job. The way I make my living day in, day out has been in this space right here. And I'm really gonna miss it. When my partner Ruby offered or brought to me the idea of moving cross country all the way to the West Coast to Portland, my only real hesitation about it was leaving the studio behind. Finding a 600 square foot garage in the city of Philadelphia in a good neighborhood that we like living in, we were so immensely lucky to find this space, and we just kind of lucked into it. It was like the first place we looked at together, and we ended up finding this. And especially now, as we've been searching for the new studio space in Portland, I'm realizing just how lucky we were to have stumbled into it, because it's been an adventure. And I think realistically, that's the tour of this space. There's a lot more small details and things I could talk about, but I could go on for ages about where it is that I work. Realistically, it's time to close a chapter here and leave this space. As I said, by the time you're seeing this, I'm already not here anymore, and we are in the new space. I'll show you that in the very near future as we build it out and get the new studio going and a whole new setup going here. So thanks for coming around, folks, and I will catch you in the next one.